Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of DoorDash and Numbers, where I break down the metrics related to gig work, so that way you can know if you are actually being profitable, as well as giving tips and tricks so that way you can maximize those profits as well. So in this video, I just wanted to cover a few things that will be important later on. Understanding these metrics will definitely help with the breakdown of some things. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, which I'm honestly surprised there's a debate about, but it's active time versus dash time. And basically this metric is important because that's how you calculate your hourly. And so a lot of people will go off the active time, surprisingly, and that number's a lot less. So if you're dividing by your total earnings by your active time, your hourly rate is going to be inflated, and it's just a little bit misleading. So why I think it's very important to go by total dash time is because, number one, you are putting that much time out in the world. You're devoting that to making that money. So also it's like, if you're going to do something else, that's the amount of time that you could put towards something else. So it's really the only metric that matters when deciding if it's worth it for you or not. And that's what this is really about. So I really like how Nugs put it.
Do all these other things, scroll on your phone, respond to messages, do all these other things, and then deduct that time. Oh, I only worked half the day, so actually I get to double my hourly pay. No, you spent 8 hours of your time. You just happen to get paid to shit. Just like if you DoorDash, you get paid to sit. Unless you're multi-apping, that's the only thing that makes sense. If you're running multiple apps at once and then it gets all confusing, sure, you can count the active time.
If you are in an office and you're just sitting around for half of the time, you're still getting paid $15 an hour for the 8 hours that you're there at an office. But if you were to do that metric by active time, the 4 hours that you're actually active, then sure, that'd be $30 an hour, but you're there for 8 hours and you're putting that much time into it. So just to compare apples to apples in that way, I think is really important.
Hey, Editing Alex here, just to say that an even better way to track your hours is by simply taking note of your starting time and your ending time, and then subtracting your breaks from that, because if you have DoorDash paused, it actually still continues to count those hours even though you're not taking orders, as well as if you're multi-apping, you don't always have DoorDash on to track those hours on the other apps.
So that's the first one. And then the second one is counting miles. And there's a lot of controversy around this because it is really important for taxes. And it's like, well, you don't want to mess up, you don't want to do anything illegal and, get audited and, pay a bunch of fines or whatever. So, but basically this is how you should be tracking your miles. You should start your odometer like this at the start of every dash. And if you don't have a tracker, then just take note of what your odometer is. And then at the end of your dash, subtract that from what your odometer is. So, if you drove 100 miles, that'll show up with the difference. Obviously, a lot of cars now have an automatic counter for you. So you can just reset the counter every morning that you go out, and then take note of it at the end and write it down in your notes or whatever you use to track. There are a lot of app trackers that will count your miles for you. I don't really trust those. I've never used them. I just like doing it manually. I think the one caveat to this though is if you are going to do some errands or something in the middle of your shift that aren't business related, then you need to subtract those miles from your total. So for example, a couple days ago I drove 130 miles, but in the middle of the day I went and got something for my sister and I paused all my apps and everything. That obviously wasn't related, so I subtracted about 20 miles from that. So I really only drove 110 miles. So that's important. And now the big question with this is commute. So if you have a regular W-2 job, you can't deduct your commute out or miles. That should go the same for DoorDash, right? Now, yes. So it's a little complicated. For example, I don't ever count my miles coming home from my last delivery because that's technically commute. However, when I start my dash and say I'm at home starting my dash there, then I have turned on my apps. I am actively looking for orders. And if I'm driving with intention to find orders, that's business miles. And this video here by your driver, Mike, OG, go follow him. he is actually talking to a tax professional that lays that out. So I'll have the link to his video in the description there. And again, she talks about, as long as there is intention to do business, then you can write off those miles.
There may be some other times where you're online, you are intending to do business, which means those miles are deductible, but they're not necessarily on a trip. So really keeping a log is ideal here. So absolutely.
And again, it is a very gray area. So this is just my advice, but definitely talk to a tax professional if you want extra clarity on that. So that's just the two things I wanted to cover today. Again, these are important going into our next videos, where we are going to be breaking down cost per mile and seeing if it's actually worth it with how much you're making versus your other opportunities that, you know, may be around. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be my next video. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.